apportionments come from the local church. And finding the correct balance in that system will create financial health for both the conference and the local church. And that's what we really need, because we can't have a healthy one without the healthy other. And so that's really needs to be our priorities moving forward. So I want to celebrate some of our successes. First of all, actually this number isn't even right anymore. I was talking to Katie Dawson yesterday. We've now crossed $2.1 million for Imagine No Malaria. So I guess that turns into we've saved over 210,000 lives through this program. Another program that I find to be absolutely wonderful is the Thanksgiving In-Gathering program. The goal for this year was to raise $1.6 million in cash and in-kind donations, multiple sites. And this is a program that feeds the hungry at the local level, the regional level, the state level, the national level, and the world level. This is truly a program that through the connection, well, both of those are truly programs through the connection that we do as a conference, the scope and size that the local church couldn't possibly do. The really neat thing about those two programs is we don't spend $1 of apportionments on either one of them. Both of them are true connections between Iowa, our neighborhoods, and the world that we're able to accomplish. There's some other programs that the connection is very successful with. Justice for Our Neighbors serves the marginalized of society, the immigration population. It evolved from a half-time position in one office to 5 offices across the state, ever growing. Women at the Well is a truly unique ministry that we offer within our conference. It's a congregation within the women's prison. It certainly couldn't exist without the support of the entire connection. The connection, the local churches support this important and pretty unique ministry. Another thing is the Iowa-Nigeria Partnership will celebrate its 25th anniversary this year as Iowa's outreach to Nigeria and the good that it has done. So there's a lot of great things we do through the connection. But we also need to look at the other side of the coin, and that's some of our statistics over the years. And so let's look at a summary of some of the statistics. And over the past 15 years, the membership of total professing members in the United Methodist Church in Iowa, and your matrix here is 1998 is on one side, 2013 is on the other side. Usually the screen's low enough I can point, but there's no chance I can jump that high because my jumping actually goes downwards, you know. I think some of you remember there's a Woody Harrelson movie about this whole thing, about me trying to jump. We went from 202,000 professing United Methodist members in 1998 to 167 now, a 15% decline. Over that same time frame, we had a net gain of 7 new churches. There was actually a couple more church starts, but there was actually church start and failure within that same time period. So over that time period, we opened 7 new churches. 20% of our churches, or 163 of them, grew in size. 80% of our churches stayed the same in size or declined, and 85 churches closed. Even with the fewer churches, our average membership went from 234 to 214, and the median membership, half are bigger than it, half are smaller than it, went from 139 to 124. The decline happened in every single district. We know that there's a rural to urban exodus in the state of Iowa, but it happened in every one of our districts. The population of Iowa at that same time grew. So the percentage of Methodists, United Methodists in the state of Iowa went from 7% in 1998 to 5.4%. Only 6 counties in the state during that time frame grew in the number of United Methodists. Those counties are Lyon, Johnson, Allamakee, Davis, Worth, and Emmett. But in the state of Iowa, 36 counties grew over that same time period. And of those 36 growing counties, only Davis County in southern Iowa and Johnson County, which of course is in the Iowa City area, grew in both population and United Methodists. The next page, I have an eye chart you have no chance of seeing, but I can quote from it. It's much more enjoyable when you see. You can grab this off the website over the next couple days. We're in the largest county in Iowa right now, in Polk County. Over those 15 years, Polk County grew by almost 100,000 people. However, the United Methodists in Polk County, Iowa, went from 15,000 to 13,900. We have fewer United Methodists, whereas Polk County grew by over 100. If we go about 5 blocks down the street, we go to Dallas County, Iowa. Dallas County, Iowa grew by 97% over the last 15 years. Witness again that I had cornfields where Jordan Creek was, and now we know they can't stop building school buildings quick enough in Dallas County. At 15 years ago, there were 3,200 United Methodists in Dallas County. Today, there's only 3,000. As we talk about establishing new communities of faith, there's some low-hanging fruit as we look at organizational structure and opportunities in some of those bigger things, as well as the other communities of faith that we can bring in that every congregation has an opportunity to go after. If we do nothing, and we do a simple polynomial regression, and we take that out over time, we have a challenge. Obviously, this isn't if we take a polynomial regression out for farther than we have data, it's not a valid projection. But it is valid for probably the next 5 years if we do nothing. If we do nothing, the trajectory we're on is a continued decline in membership. If we look at average weekly attendance, the tushes and the pews, it's actually dropped at a little more sharp rate than even our average total professing members. Even with the fewer churches, the average weekly attendance has fallen from an average of 89 to 67. The median, half bigger, half smaller, has fallen from 55 to 39. So of our current churches, half have an average weekly attendance of 39 or less. Again, we'll take the polynomial regression out over time, and we'll look at it for the next couple years. And there's a sharp attendance, tushes in the pews, challenge that we have if we don't do anything going forward. Therefore, the strategic priorities, the 1A and the 1B. Number of United Methodist churches has fallen by about 100 over that 15-year period. Another 10 or so have closed this year. Another one just crossed my desk today. So let's project this into operating income. We have a decline of folks in the pews. The number of households giving to the local church has declined, and statistics only started recording this number in 2006, and so this decline is since 2006. The good news is the generosity continues to grow from those members in the pews, from those members, and the annual giving to local churches has climbed from 75 million to 83 million over that time period. The annual giving per person in the pew has grown at a 5.1% rate per year. So as we project that out, that's a pretty steady climb if that 5.1 yearly increase rate continues. The challenge, if we take a look at this slide, the number of people in the pews, even with the potential of increased generosity, puts a projected annual giving over the next couple of years. It looks like this. What it says is the peak annual giving to our local churches, if we do nothing, if we follow the present course, the peak annual giving will occur 2013, 2014, or 2015, somewhere in that time frame. And then without making changes, it will start declining because of the members in the pews. We've been able to validate this number with GCFA, the General Council on Finance and Administration, and they actually have said that the annual giving to local churches nationwide peaked in 2012. And so they said this is valid stuff that we need to be projecting off of as we're looking forward. With declining giving to local churches, If we simply pull in the same percentage year after year that we are currently, we still have to decrease conference expenses simply because of the decline in operating income. Let's take a look at the next step. One of my tasks that came out of annual conference this year was to study and consider the Indiana tithing system and other apportionment systems. And so there's been a lot of phone calls and discussions with other conferences, how their budgets and apportionments are structured. About 6 weeks ago, I had the National Treasurers meeting for all the United Methodist conferences, and I was able to do quite a bit more discussion about apportionments. Talk to the tithing systems, talk to Rocky Mountain that's at 15 or 14, and other conferences, and try to understand where our apportionments are in relation to others. And finally, I simply had to go and I got the data pulled in, the 2012 data, which is the last year that is available from the General Counsel on Finance and Administration. 2013 numbers are going to come out about 3 weeks ago, which means I expect to see them in about February. But we're able to do a comparison of the apportionments that we bring in as a percentage of church operating income of other conferences. But to do that, we have to look at apples to apples. There's 3 principal ways that conferences ask for dollars from the local churches. 1, conference apportionments. That's what you'd be most familiar with. Secondly, in our conference, we have district askings. In other conferences, they have some conferences, such as Oklahoma, have very large district apportionments, very sizable, that are in addition to conference things. And so they're actually larger than us. And a third thing is what we call direct bill here, or a mechanism for paying for pension and benefits. Every conference asks for them in a little different ways, but to make it as apples to apples as possible, I combined those 3 numbers and look at them as a percentage of operating income. And so I'm on the completely wrong slide here. We'll kind of get back to the right place. There we go. The range of that went from 29.1% of church operating income down to 12.1%, as you can see on that chart. The mean and median, about the average, is 19%. The high was 29.1%. There's the second bar that's right by the high. Iowa is right here at 29%. In 2012, we had the second highest percentage of dollars taken out of local church income. The first thing that we ask ourselves is, I already said I'm a Windsor Heights kid that graduated from Valley. Us Iowans have one problem. Well, first of all, every Iowa kid wants to move out of Iowa, and they end up moving back usually. But we kind of have an inferiority complex. We're kind of like, well, we're Iowans. We must be small. We're small, so it must be the fixed cost. That's what we do in Iowa. One of the things we need to be pretty proud about is the size of our conference. We're the upper third of size of conferences. With our membership, we are a large conference. And as you can see on this graph, I have an axis that's the total membership. And there's those of us that are in the upper third in size, but our rate is up here versus the large conferences in percentage of income that we take out. We can also look at the exact same thing in number of people in the pews, the average attendance. We're on the upper half of attendance, and we're still high there. So it's not a fixed versus variable cost issue. It's a high percentage issue. That slide doesn't work. And so we come back to the mission statement of discussing local churches provide the most significant arena through which disciple making occurs. And the focus on the local church. And we're pulling in 29% of a local church's income. I think that's kind of ask the question, is that the appropriate balance for financial health of our local church and the conference together? I have one more number I'm going to share with you now, and it's 78%. Does anybody know what 78% is? Besides you, Roland.
The amount that's actually paid in.
There we go. 78% is the amount of actual apportionments that will be paid in this year, give or take a couple basis points. In 2013, 7.1% of the churches, or 56 of them, paid no or less than 10% of their apportionments. I use the less than 10% because the church may have a $15,000 in apportionments for the year, and if they pay 100, that's really statistically still zero, so that we put them in that bucket there, the 7.1%. 2/3 of the churches paid all of their apportionments for the year. On a nationwide average, those little numbers say that almost 87% of the churches nationwide, 87% of apportionments nationwide are paid. So we're about 9 percentage points behind the national average. And Iowa is currently in the bottom 25% of conferences. 7 conferences, last time numbers were reported, have a lower payment rate than us. 16 conferences have 90% payment or above, with the highest conferences in the 96% range. Okay, so what do we do? Mike Morgan talked about rearranging chairs on the Titanic. Question here is, the boat's sinking. Is it time to panic? Is it time to jump? Let's not go with the boat sinking. Let's talk about finding our pathway with the priorities, with the direction, with the connection, with the things we can get together. We need to set a path in the right direction. That's what we're asking for input on today. We're putting some proposals out here and putting some ideas out here, but we need to work on this one together. We need to set a pathway. Secondly, as we find that pathway, we need to move fairly quickly. If we don't move fairly quickly, we're either going to freeze to death in the woods or get eaten by a bear. Getting eaten by a bear is a bad thing, at least I think. So we need to pick a pathway and move. And the last thing we need to remember is there's a large treasure at the end if we find a pathway and we move down the pathway. So we have to have the message of hope, but we have to set the pathway together and then move down that road together, because there is the bear. So we have to ask ourselves a couple questions. We've talked about the priorities. We've talked about the organizational structure. Here's something I didn't do today, but I recognize many faces here. I hope you've seen the budget presentations that I've put together at other meetings that we've done. I'm trying to get everybody to understand the budget as much as possible, because my questions are, what do we need and what don't we need? Only through understanding what we're doing now can we all make decisions about what we need and what we don't need. If you haven't seen the budget presentation, pull up one of the 20-minute YouTubes. Watch the budget presentation. Look at the budget slides. Try to get better understanding. If any of your congregations or any of your groups want to visit for lunch or dinner or just an evening, I'll come over. You're the easy folks to get to here. I already do have dinner engagements in some of the corners of the state. You have to understand what's there so that we can have the appropriate discussions. As you said, as we get into the interest group discussions, everybody has to know what's there so we can all have this discussion together. So I'm going to ask you a question today before we begin the budget process, and that's, where should apportionments be? Where should apportionments be for the financial health of the conference? I'm going to give you a couple scenarios before you answer that question, though, on what it means at different levels, because these questions aren't easy. There's some of you that are running up here right now and going, 7%, 10%. But what does that really mean, and how does that impact things? Because there's hard decisions to be made, and they're not easy. Our current budget this year that was approved at annual conference last June is at 19.4%. That budget includes $2.4 million that are general church apportionments. That won't change. That won't change for another 2 years. It was set by the general conference, and we're locked in for 4 years until about a year after the next general conference happens in Portland, and then we'll be assigned a new number. However, I doubt it will change much. So it's about it is $2.4 million. This year we approved just under $7.7 million in conference ministries. And we have $2.7 million in conference missions. There's $500,000 in cash reserve, and there's $2.7 million of that is allocated to unpaid apportionments. That's the flip side of 78%. I'm going to give us a couple scenarios that we're going to think about tonight, and ultimately, we're going to do a simple straw poll. I'm not going to hold you to it, but we're going to talk about which of these scenarios we're thinking about the most. Scenario one is we come to annual conference every year, and there's missions that aren't funded. There's missions that could use a few more dollars, more opportunities. Scenario one would be take the percentage of church operating income up to 21% from 19.4. As we look at the pieces, and by the way, this is on the back sheet. The screen's a little far away. This is what I would do with my Cub Scouts last night. If you have your white sheet and you fold it over the top and carefully fold it, and you hold this here, I saw the Cub Scouts flags and I was thinking about running my own PAC meeting last night. This is in front of you, so you should be able to follow along with this. On the back sheet are the same scenarios I'm putting on the board. And so that was scenario one, is general church apportionments stay at $2.4 million, holding conference missions at $7.7 million, status quo there in dollars. Conference missions, give it a couple $100,000 more dollars and take it to 2.9. We still would have $500,000 in cash reserves, and we would hold a little over $3 million in unpaid apportionments. Scenario two would be a status quo in percentage, 19.4%. 80% apportionment payment. We would hold general church apportionments at the $2.4 million. It won't change on the scenarios. Lower conference ministries by about $500,000. As I said, with lower operating income, even the status quo is going to require reductions. Then conference missions would come down about $200,000 to $2.4 million. We'd have $500,000 for cash reserve and about $3 million for unpaid apportionments. And that would keep us at 19.4%. Scenario three, this would bring us down to 17% for apportionments of church operating income. In this scenario, general church apportionments again stay at $2.4 million. Conference ministries would come down a full $1 million. Conference missions would come down about $1.2 to $1.3 million. There's nothing definitive in there. There's still some movement back and forth. But I have to remind you, in conference ministries, over the years, we've made decisions to invest in fixed costs, buildings, other costs that have to occur, insurance, other things like that that simply aren't variable. They're fact of lives within the administrative number that occur one way or the other. $500,000 for cash reserve and $2.7 million for unpaid apportionment allocation. Scenario four takes us down to 15%. That starts bringing us down to the Rocky Mountain Conference level or some of the others as we've researched them, and is kind of a normal area for conferences, or many conferences. Then you put the direct bill on at the top, it gets them back into that 19% range total. So this is an area where conference apportionments often happen. At an 80% apportionment payment rate, which is what we're factoring here, we still have $2.4 million for general church. We take the conference ministries down by over $1 million again at $2.6 million. However, at our 80% apportionment rate, it takes the conference missions from $2.6 million to $38,000. We start running out of dollars in that area. $500,000 for cash reserves and $2.4 million in unpaid apportionments. I'm going to bring one more scenario out there for you, and we're going to call it scenario five. Scenario five doesn't happen in 1 year. It happens over time, and hopefully would happen quickly over time. Yeah, it tells a story. There we go. I'm surprised you can see the numbers. I'm not sure I could actually see them from there. So that's really, it looks better. It looks better from there than the little screen I'm looking at over there. So I should be talking this direction. It doesn't work for the camera. Is this my better side art? Like this one? Okay. I usually cut some of the jokes out when he actually puts a camera up, but I usually can't resist sooner or later here. So this is one, financially, I can't do this the first year. I can't say, we're going to be at 90%. It's not fiduciarily responsible. It has to be something we have to prove to ourselves that we can do and build the trust back to make this happen. But at the spending of 17%, if we were then paying 90% apportionments, if we were able to evolve it from 80 to 90%, and we were able to reduce the unpaid apportionment line from 2.7 to 1.2-ish, we could take this line and we could hold the same spending. The $1 million reduction in conference ministries, about a $1 million reduction in conference missions, balanced between the two, still have $500,000 in apportionments, but a road to 50 is also a road that requires a higher payment of apportionments going forward. So I'm going to ask you, where should apportionments be? And I'm going to have everybody, and don't sneak out of here on me, I need you to fill out the pink sheets. I'm going to keep reminding you of that. Fill out the pink sheets. Secondly, I'm going to have you come forward as you're exiting, but you have to exit this way. And there's red dots here, right on the corner. And I want you to put a red dot on what we should shoot for with the amount of information I've been able to give you as a starting point. I also put 10% on here. I've told everybody that that would be an interesting budgeting scenario. As I said, as a budgeter, that would be an interesting scenario. I'm not sure it's anything we would want to do, at least as you look at how far it would go. But if I don't put that on there, somebody in every center is going to write it in, so I'm just putting it down there for you. Please put a dot on there. That would fall, and I'll have dots all over the floor. I'm also going to ask you a question. I hope you've had the budget presentation. If not, you can answer this question for me later, although I have a satchel of answers here that I'm looking forward to typing up, because I want to investigate every one of them. Part of the commitment in the strategic priorities was zero-sum budgeting, starting at zero and starting all over again. I want to look at all the pieces again, and I certainly want ideas to make sure I'm looking at all the places we want to start over again. I have Post-it notes. I've been doing these a lot of them at round tables. This one in the pews is a little different. I have Post-it notes and pens that you can grab, and I want you to take just a minute or two. If there's something we absolutely need and we need to do more of, that's yellow. That's kind of the positive. And so you might be watching this presentation and you might be thinking, we need to put more funds into parish development, or we need to put more funds into, the IT department lunch program, or something like that. Art really needs a better sweater. Better sweaters for art, okay? You can do anything you want there. But even in a time when you're reducing budgets, you have to increase the things that drive what you need. So we need to have some yellows. And then we have the pinks. That's kind of like red for stop, is the way I visualized it as I was walking through Staples. If there's things you want us to look at that needs to be cut back on or reduced, or at least carefully looked at from a zero sum, write those on the pink sheet. Just kind of stick them, just kind of create a pile of them here, or actually put them on my rainbow colored folder, because this is where they're going to go. I'll put them in there. I have 3 outputs of this meeting. Well, there's going to be 4 in this meeting. One, there's a videotape that we're going to put the presentations out there. But on the Treasurer's website, you're going to see every site is going to have their 5 or 6 items. Every site is going to have this posted. And every site, although I'm not going to do it by site because I'm putting it in here, I'm going to list every one of these that I can possibly read. And I have some people that write, so I can't read them. I'm going to put them out there so we can all see what the ideas are. And some you'll agree with and some you won't. But we need to look at all of them so we can have the discussion among all of us. And so that's what I'm going to ask you for in tonight's presentation is Post-it notes, fill out your pink forms if I haven't said that yet tonight. Give me a red dot vote. And then I'm going to remind you of the next steps. There's more town hall meetings. There's 10 more, 9 more. Today's the 7th one. I'm doing 16 of them from Donaldson, Iowa to Sioux City, from Clear Lake to, I don't even know how far south I'm going. I think I'm going to like Springfield, Missouri. We're going to review the findings. We're going to go through them. We're going to publish them. We're going to look at them. We're going to build them, challenge in the budget process, build them into the budget process, build them into the ministry plans. I'll be back. There's pre-conference meetings. Today, there's some of the ideas that I've presented, Mike Morgan's presented. Today, we're asking for input. As I've told everybody, the meeting I'm going to worry about is the time we come back for pre-conference meetings. If we present that exact same org chart or some of these exact same ideas as we've taken in all this feedback, I'm not going to be wanting to be the guy standing up here because that means we didn't take the input in. Instead, I want to see where that evolves, where we've had the conversations. We're trying to give everybody a chance to have a conversation and where it goes. So when we come back, we'll see where it's evolved. You'll have more feedback time there. And then I'm going to remind you, everybody, the Methodist system as we vote on it at annual conference, both the design task force, the direction of the budgets, these are all things we're going to be voting on in the future. So there's still more input. That's why we're here in November, because we want to get it right in June. So all I'm going to end with is really this is a to be continued session. And I hope you understood the discussion. I hope this creates more discussion